You're tuned to Resonance 104.4 FM, the art of listening.
Art Transmission. Art Transmission was a radio experiment devised to go out on a local community station on the Isle of Sheppey. And I'm Daniel, and we're going to be joined in the studio with Laura and Louise.
Hello. Hi, Daniel.
Our first sound artist, Jim.
Yeah, and I brought the maps as well, Daniel, today.
And our second sound artist, Jane.
Hi, Daniel, and I've got my gloves up.
So, if I talk a little bit about myself and the start of the project, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the project with Laura and Louise. I'm Daniel. I'm a community presenter on the community station that Art Transmission was originally devised for. It's called BRFM Bridge Radio, and it's based on the Isle of Sheppey. And the project was devised for 3 local groups to work with 3 sound artists, and they were on the Isle of Sheppey and Swale. Our station's based on the Isle of Sheppey, and basically the Isle of Sheppey is an island in the Thames and Medway estuary, and our studio looks out, actually we're very lucky, it looks out across to Southend, Whitstable and Herne Bay. I'm a artist and also, as I say, a community presenter, and basically what I've done over the years is interviewed and worked with the art community locally, and through doing that I come across Laura and Louise, and that's how this project came about. So hopefully Laura and Louise, you could tell us a little bit about FrancisKnight first.
Yes, I will. Oh, I can hear myself now. Brilliant. FrancisKnight is an arts organisation. It comprises of myself, Laura Knight, and my colleague Louise Francis. We've been going for about 10 years this year. It's our anniversary, so we started in 2004. We are based in Maidstone and we work across the southeast. We work with artists. We commission and present new work in the public realm. It can be temporary or permanent. But really fundamentally we like to collaborate. So we collaborate with artists and our partners on all our projects. Work ranges from commissioning, curation, community engagement, and our partners can be from commercial, charitable, local authority, or some self-initiated projects, which Art Transmission is.
Louise, can you tell us a bit more about Art Transmission as a whole project?
Yeah, well, it was devised as a radio experiment. We managed to come across some funding as part of Creative People and Places for Swale and Medway, also known as Ideas Test. And we put forward an idea for a project which was about testing whether we could present new artworks on the radio through a community radio. And as you know, we'd worked with you, Daniel, for about 3 years while we were in Laysdown on a project called Laysdown Rose Tinted, and we felt that we wanted to do a project with you, so obviously spoke to you about some of the groups that you currently work with, that you've interviewed since you've been on BRFM, and devised this project that could include them, and it's evolved really from the very beginning. But we presented the project to Creative People and Places. We were successful with the funding, and then we started to work with you.
So has the project turned out as you expected?
I think it's turned out. I think we had an idea of what we were trying to do at the beginning, but I think with every project it's evolved and changed, and it's become something more than it was. Don't you agree, Louise?
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
I think we've always worked in visual arts, so to actually do a work with a sound artist was fantastic, and to be able to work with you on BRFM was brilliant. And the 3 artists that we chose were fabulous, and the work was outstanding. We weren't expecting. I don't know what we were expecting, actually. It was an experiment, so that was the lovely thing about it, that we could actually just try things and see if they worked. And I think with all the artists, they were trying things as well, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But actually the work that was produced was just fantastic.
So we're next going to be talking to Jim. He's the first sound artist that we worked with, and you worked with the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway. But Jim, I was hoping you could perhaps tell us a little bit about yourself firstly.
Well, I'll start at the beginning, Daniel. I was born a sound artist, and the evidence for that is in my mother's womb. They found a small pair of headphones along with a thumb piano, a miniature thumb piano. But that's not all. I also make the odd film, but my films are pretty X-rated sort of films, so not wholly relevant today.
We didn't know that, Jim.
No,
we didn't know that.
We do know that, do you?
Revelations.
Okay. There's no secrets in this life anymore, are there? There's no closets left to hide in. So, so I was contacted by Laura and Louise and asked to put in the project if I had some suggestions. And, I was quite amazed and absolutely delighted to be one of the chosen artists.
Now, the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway is a pretty amazing place. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about it, Jim.
Well, where shall I start? The SKLR, as it's known in the world of acronyms, the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway. Well, it takes its name from its two locations. Sittingbourne is a sleepy town in Kent, and Kemsley Down is the site of one of Europe's largest paper mills. The D.S. Smith paper mill, I think, is it, Daniel, it's called? Right, well, they've got their home base there, the light railway. Now, it's a heritage railway, so-called, usually known as a preservation railway as well. So that means that they've inherited a lot of stock from an old existing railway. Now, the history of the railway as such is that this is all industrial land, and the SKLR is built on the site of where there was the old paper mill, essentially. And if you go back in time, this railway's been around 100 years or so. And if you geographically, can I get my map out now?
Yes, yeah.
Can I have some map sound effects?
Do you need a hand?
Yes, please. Can you do the map sound? Jane's going to, with her boxing gloves on.
It's not easy.
This is going to be a little bit clumsy with the boxing gloves.
It's a pretty big map, Jim.
It's a pretty good map, you know. I mean, it's a bit grubby, but that's me and maps.
Perfect radio.
Oh, I can see now. It's shaped like a giant hedgehog, and we have running up from Sittingbourne. Sorry, we're getting out of hand here, aren't we? Running up from Sittingbourne is something called Milton Creek, which is a body of water that runs up to the Swale. Now, the Swale is a body of water that separates the mainland from the Isle of Sheppey, and the Isle of Sheppey is a true island, isn't it, Daniel?
Yeah, it's a complete island with just a bridge. The only way of getting on to it is
just a bridge, and it's not even that old, the bridge. So the railway sort of tracks up and follows the branch of Milton Creek, and originally the railway was much longer. It went all the way out to the Swale to somewhere called Ridham Dock, and this is where the old paper mill, Edward Lloyd's paper mill, used to bring in raw materials, and they would be shipped down this railway to a mill at Kemsley and another one at Sittingbourne. So the railway continued all the way down there on a single track. Now, it's an industrial scale railway, so the engines are much smaller than conventional engines. The tracks are narrower gauge for all you train spotters. And what's happened is, in 1969, the mill went over to road transport. So they decided they'd had enough of these beautiful steam trains that they'd run everything on. And they thought, let's modernise. They had some Canadian advisors who came in, and being Canadians, they said, yeah, you know, the only way to go is with the lorries and stuff. And so they're left with this railway. And a lot of the people who worked at the mill were actually railway enthusiasts, and they got in touch with the forerunners to the SKLR, who used to sort of look at heritage railways and preserve these things. And they formed a special sort of collective of people, and with permission from the mill, managed to keep this railway running. So it was closed for a very short time. So this is one of the incredible things about this railway, is that it's been in almost continuous operation for over 100 years. And they inherited the engines, the steam engines. They've since added to that. They've got rolling stock. Oh, I've disappeared, have I? Hello? I'm back. Technical hitch. Sorry, I could talk for hours about this railway. I just say the things that are unique about it is that it's not a pretty railway where it's based. It's not like if you know anything about these sort of railways, it's like the Bluebell Railway or the Watercress lines. These are very scenic railways. You can travel up and down and see lots of country flowers and trees and squirrels smiling at you. But if you travel on the SKLR out of Sittingbourne, you're really going through a sort of industrial landscape, past people who make concrete pipes, past waste compactors and rubbish dumps, and then on past the sort of country park there, this beautiful country park. And then looming in the distance as you travel up this line comes this huge paper mill, which really sits like a giant sort of castle on this very flat landscape that is quite unique to the Swale area. So it's in that sense it's a very unique sort of journey. And the other thing I'd say about it is the actual sort of area itself. It's right next to the creek there, so there's a very sort of wild atmosphere up there. Somehow the creek is very open and a great place for migratory birds, I understand.
Well, what was nice being down at the Sydenham Thames Light Railway was how incredibly friendly they were and how willing they were to let us come down, Jim. And we actually spent probably about 3 months going down on a Wednesdays. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the experiences of working with the railway and what that was like.
Yes, allow me to switch microphones there, thank you. Seamlessly, without anyone noticing. Yes, what was it like? Well, you see, I think initially we'd sort of planned to go down and maybe pay a few visits and get to know the place and sort of gather some material to work with. And my original plan, can I talk about that, Daniel? I was going to try and develop some sort of scripts based on the experiences of the members and have a sort of working platform that could incorporate sounds from the area into a finished piece. But I quickly realised when we went down there, what was needed was a very definite commitment and sense of engagement with this community of volunteers. One example will suffice, that it's a working railway and it's run to sort of service the public, essentially, so people can purchase a ticket and go for a ride on this railway. So all the usual railway considerations come into play, so health and safety with all the implications. So these engines, steam engines, have to be maintained, track needs to be maintained, inspected regularly, along with everything else. There's catering departments, it's such a huge operation. There's sort of gardens there and things. Oh, have I gone again? Yes. So essentially, Daniel, to answer your question, what was needed was we both realised, I think, what was needed was to be on site and to spend as much time down there as we could. So we more or less became a fixture. And I think one of the really nice things about the project is after getting over that initial getting to know you period, because obviously a working railway, they're very busy, the people down there, and they don't have lots of time for sound artists to come in and start keeping them from their tasks, because they work down there every Wednesdays, their working days. They're open to the public at the weekends. So we're down there really trying to get as much done as we can. And I think the situation became that we became like an extra department. We became like the art department of the SKLR. So we're down there and we sort of integrated very sort of beautifully with the SKLR, I think, and in some respects, and people got used to the sight of us sneaking around with microphones and clambering over wagons and setting up pieces of metal to beat with our fists and all sorts of wonderful activities.
So, Jim, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about some of your favourite sounds and memories while you were down there. There's so many. There's so many aspects to the SKLR. I mean, this is the daunting thing as a sound artist, because, my first attraction, of course, working with steam engines, and I've got a lifelong love of the sound of steam engines. And
you were quite romantic about it as well, weren't you, Jim, if I remember, when you had your...
Misty-eyed does not describe it, Louise, It's more than mist. I think I was bawling with steam coming out my eyes. And you see these engines, they're poetic and they're rich in sound, and they evoke so many different feelings and sort of memories and fantasies. And I'm quite a film buff, so also there's lots of sort of film moments that strike me, with steam trains coming up the tracks in westerns or those Hitchcock movies. But then getting to this site, it's suddenly, this is just like one small aspect. I mean, on the SKLR, because it's situated on that sort of lovely swale area, you've got all this wildlife. They've got the creek there. So there's these beautiful sounds and peaceful sounds. And, you know, one of my favourite memories is when we were allowed to wander up the tracks. And in one particular occasion, they have these people who maintain the tracks, they're called Permanent Way. And they go out and do all the track maintenance and sleeper maintenance and stuff. And on this particular day, I'd heard about this thing called sleeper tapping. So it's how you tell whether the sleepers on the railway are still sort of fit for purpose or where they're rotting away. And of course they sit in the ground, these things are around 30 years, so there's this rolling program, a bit like painting the Forth Bridge, of replacing these things gradually. So I remember, Daniel, we were both expecting that there was some special sort of tool you would get to tap these sleepers. I thought, great, you know, what a lovely sound piece, tapping sleepers, slapping teepers. Spoonerism time. And so I went to Bob, Bob of the SKLR, and said, could I have the sleeper tapping tool? Would it be okay to tap some sleepers? And Bob went in his shed and he came out with this monster club hammer. I just thought he was taking the rise, really. He said, no. And I said, how do you tap a sleeper? I mean, he was looking at me like I was slightly insane because, you know, the railway people, of course, know all this stuff. To me, it's virgin knowledge. And he demonstrated. He went to an old sleeper, he picked up this hammer, raised it above his head like the mighty Thor of Marvel Comics, and brought it crashing down. So there you go. So off we went. Daniel, you were thankfully there to assist me that day. So while I could record with one hand, with your mighty arm, you tapped some sleepers, and we found some beauties out there, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was a great experience, actually, and you could actually tell the difference between some of the older sleepers and the newer sleepers, and it was great to go along the track, because when you travel on the track, on the train, of course, you don't get to have a real good look at the scenery or the track or what's done in the same light, so it was a real experience that day, I think.
Very special. I mean, it's the atmosphere down on the track when you're there on your own, and it's almost an indescribable atmosphere. It's very peaceful. But there's all this industrial history flooding in, and the visual aspect of the rails, all the sounds that surround you. I mean, you know, as I said, it's an industrial area, so you've got all these sounds flooding in, and smells. My God, the smells down there. I mean, the sewage works. You know,
it's not a good smell necessarily.
It's a mixture of things. You've got the smell of the mill, the sewage works, the smell coming in off of Milton Creek. Sometimes you can smell the sea, and it's an interesting mixture.
Well, we actually, or you did, Jim, produced 6 pieces of sound art, which I originally played out one each week over 6 weeks, and we've picked one of those pieces of sound art to play. I was hoping you could introduce that for us just before we play it.
Yeah, well, this piece we're about to hear, Daniel, was particularly inspired by the Permanent Way department I mentioned. These are people who run up and down the track, fixing things up and laying new tracks and new sleepers and stuff, and doing general maintenance. So, you know, it's a very endless, busy job, and these people are out there all weathers, and it just made me think about that whole railway history when you think of all the miles of track. And of course, before beaching and stuff in the 50s, when they closed off a lot of railways, places that are now cycle tracks, you know, England was covered in miles and miles of all this track that needed maintenance, because obviously the dangers are you run a train up there one day and a sleeper gives and you can have a disaster in your hand. So in a sense it's sort of dedicated to those people who go out in winter and in the rain, and also in the blazing sun. And of course we did most of this in winter, Daniel, so I think we experienced the worst that the swell can throw at you, you know. Yeah, so it's really inspired by interviews we did with volunteers from the railway and our own experiences of wandering around the place.
I've always had a thing about tracks. As a kid, I used to have this dream about being an escaped prisoner. I was being tracked through the marshes by guards and angry dogs. It's funny how your real criminal types are seldom taxed with nightmares of this kind. Then I discovered tracks. Almost as soon as I saw those gleaming steel rails, I fell in love. To me, the most beautiful sight in the world is looking out the train window at the adjacent rails, seeing them scurry into a stroboscopic fuzz, watching them merge, then part ways in a mad mating dance.
Press your ear to the rail. Episode 2. Track.
Pick shovels. We need a drill, obviously, to drill the sleepers with. Crowbars. It's all heavy kit. So we have to get it out, put it on the train, load up, and go to the job.
I'll never forget that day. We were out on the line, the permanent weight crew as we're called, doing our usual track inspections and replacing a few old sleepers. It was bitter cold. Despite a biting wind blowing in off the creek, every breath hung in the air like a translucent balloon at a kiddie's party. The earth was near frozen and the very devil to dig. All the same, work is work, and we pride ourselves in going out in all weathers. If the entire country ground to a halt every time there was a spot of rain or the old thermometer dropped below zero, where would we be, eh? As we were digging out the ballast and compacted clinker from beneath a rotten sleeper, Bert's pickaxe hit something solid. You could hear it halfway down the track. The metal rang like a bell. And the shaft of the axe gave Bert's wrists a right shake-up. "What do you got there, Bert?" I asked. "Buried treasure?" What we found, buried in that cold, cold earth, would make a grown adult shudder and a less than sober person fall off their chair. All I know is every hair on the back of my head stood up on end, even though there ain't so many hairs left now. And to think as a youth I had hair down to my cheeks and played the sitar with my bare teeth. What we found was a body, a human body, frozen into a thick rectangle of ice.
"Foul play!"
shouted Fred.
"Let's call the coppers." "Wait, hang on a second,"
said Bert.
"This body's been here at least since the 1960s.
Since when have you been running CSI?
Says Fred.
How can you tell how long it's lain there?
Looking again, I saw what Bert, sharp as a pinball, had spotted. The body, perfectly preserved, was clad in a Bowaters uniform. The bird and arrow logo and the style of clothing told of that far-off time.
Poor mucker. Most likely froze to death in the terrible winter of 1963, the coldest on record. It's said that the Weetabix froze on the end of people's spoons."
Not only that,
said Fred,
the Straits of Dover almost froze over. Imagine that. England would have been joined to France for the first time in 10,000 years. Eric Cantona would have had a field day. How do you suppose he got here?
Well, most likely his loco broke down in a blizzard and he wandered off up the tracks to get some help. On the way, he must have succumbed to hypothermia.
What a way to go, said I. What we do, Bert? We can't just leave him here.
True enough. Let's load him onto the ballast wagon. We can drop him off when we get back. He deserves a decent burial if nothing else.
Maybe they'll let us bury him in the garden, next to that beautiful blackthorn tree.
Oh, I don't know about that, Fred. You can't just go burying people all over the shop.
All this time, the eyes of the bloke encased in the ice looked out at us. It gave me a creepy feeling like we were being stared at.
Daniel and Jim have wandered off down the track to tap a few sleepers. They'll be listening out for the telltale sounds that tell you if the sleeper needs replacing.
A fine honourable tradition of the railroad is sleeper tapping to see whether your sleepers on the railroad are in good condition, or else some of these sleepers, they sit in the earth, so they absorb a lot of moisture over time. The sleepers decay, and we've seen a few along the way, haven't we, Daniel, that looked a bit worse for wear?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So it'd be interesting to see the difference in sounds from some of the ones that look good, some of the new ones, to some of the ones that actually look quite rough.
Right, Daniel's just swept the loose ballast off the top of the sleeper so he can get a good, clean, uncluttered surface to strike with the hammer. This is brand new rail. Let's see if we can tap it without smashing it. We don't even need to tap this one, because visually we can see there seems to be
a whole section missing with gravel and looks like some sort of blackberry type bush trying to grow through it.
Well, I should come back in autumn and help myself to some of these delicious blackberries, but before then, should we just have a tap of this rail as a comparison? What's your opinion?
Definitely rotten, I think.
My next idea would be to get a team of woodpeckers down here to do this rail tapping.
Yeah.
After all, they're the experts.
Yeah, we probably are. Probably get quite a nice tap from them.
I'll bet.
That afternoon, the day's work done, we loaded up our tools on the wagon and gently chugged back to Kemsley Down, pushed by our faithful diesel Victor. We dropped the body off, still frozen solid in its block of ice, at the office and headed to the cafe for a nice steaming mug of tea. Just the thing to warm the hands after a day spent breaking icicles off the end of your nose. Unfortunately, we didn't notice we'd left the heater on in the office. When we popped back, the ice block had melted and the body was gone. All that remained was the driver's hat with its distinctive Bowaters crest and a massive pool of water.
Liz'll be furious,
said Fred.
You've soaked one of her maps.
Less out of you, mate,
said Bert.
We're all in this together. We's like the musketeers, without the muskets.
We followed the driver's tracks, plainly visible in the thick snow, out across the yard to the fence. The footprints continued on the other side, and out across Milton Creek, out towards Merston, where they vanished into the thick silvery mud that gets exposed at low tide.
How did he get over the fence?
Asked Fred.
He passed through it like it wasn't there.
Well, it's a queer old business for sure,
said Bert, shaking his head gravely. The driver's cap sits in our museum now, an eerie reminder of that day when Bert's axe struck ice. When I think of it now, I can't help myself, but an icy shiver passes right down my spine.
I'm afraid the only mechanisation we've got is an electric drill, 110 volts. That's it. The rest of it is us doing the shoveling.
And that was one of 6 parts, and if you'd like to listen to all the parts, they are available through YouTube by simply searching Art Transmission Jim Whelton. We're now going to be talking to Jane. Jane was our second of 3 sound artists, and she worked with the Minster Golden Gloves Amateur Boxing Club. Jane, I was hoping we could start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself firstly.
Well, like Jim, I was born with an ear trumpet and a megaphone, and I made some detours for a bit of visual art and running away with the circus. But these days, that's led to participatory practice, making work that's come out of street performance, interactive street performance, and very direct connection with the people that I work with.
So could you explain to us a bit more about the boxing club for our listeners? Kind of describe it for us.
Minster Golden Gloves Boxing Club. Well, if I take you on a little journey from where Jim was talking about, if we go across the Swale, over that flat, amazing marsh landscape, up over the beautiful bridge, and you kind of almost land in Sheerness at the end of the bridge, and follow the dock wall, the incredible high dock wall, and a place called Bluetown, which is quite a kind of closed-in little space. And we started the work in January, and they meet 3 times a week, Minster Golden Gloves, and in this place called Bluetown, in a converted car wash. And so I always arrived in the pitch black, up against the dock wall, open the door, and this bright light comes out of the incredibly clean white space with blue astroturf and a boxing ring at one end of it, and loads of punch bags all on chains, and just crammed full of people all getting into their discipline.
It was a pretty amazing space, James. What was it like working with the club?
Well, they're very... it's like a kind of big family, extended family, really. It's started by Terry, who comes from my old home of South East London, so kind of bonded a bit there. And he runs Tiger Tyres, but he's very keen to engender respect, friendship, and discipline amongst the young people that go there, and also incredible trainers who, some of them boxes themselves, some of them are just really well respected trainers. And so there's a young group and there's an older group, and they just go, it's all about the boxing. It's not, there's no, you don't come in and chat for hours, you just go in there, get your gloves on, gloves up, and on with it.
So what was the process you used to work with the club?
Well, I went, like Jim, actually. I was going every Wednesday, and pretty much from January right through to April, May, once a week, and kind of inveigled myself in amongst the punch bags and squeezed myself in behind the ring, and got them all used to me being around with my microphones. I had a boom mic and some contact mics and stuff. I was just mining for sounds in the space. I was looking for the rhythms in all their activity. So it wasn't just about the punch. I was really looking for the sounds underneath as well. These incredible breath sounds that the young ones learn their out breaths, because essentially if they're not going to do those, they'll pass out. They have to be able to breathe. So this oosh sound that then, as they become more developed boxers and older, there starts to be, it's almost like their little fingerprint, they're individual. So some of them are more guttural, kind of and some of them are higher up, and then I got really obsessed with the skipping rope. So that was the skipping rope was just the kind of what do you call it, the holy grail of sounds. Trying to record in that, imagine just constant clamour. You've got chains clanking, bags punching, all the oonch and everything going on, and underneath there's this fantastic kind of sound from the skipping ropes. I kind of got there. I got a few seconds of it, which I then extended to use a bit more. But constant activity. So trying to isolate any sounds, just had to give up on that really, and just keep recording.
One of the things we wanted the project to be was very flexible, and I know Jim's changed as the process went through. So Jane, did you achieve everything you wanted to, and how did it change?
Well, no, I did go with an open mind, but I did also really, really want to. I've developed in my the rest of my practice this sounding methodology where I directly translate the soundscape or the environment through deep listening and then vocalisation, and that's kind of almost like a phoneticization of the activity. And I really wanted to get all of the boxers to vocalise versions of their activity, and we got a little way with that, but you know, their total focus and discipline is on doing the boxing. So I adapted, and it was a really good challenge for my work, actually, because it changed how I made the work. Got a little bit of vocalising in there, but mostly it was recorded sound that I used.
Now, you produced 3 pieces for us.
4.
Yes, that's right, 4. Yeah, you produced 4 pieces.
Actually, that's the thing about it, because I did set out to produce 3.
That's right.
Yeah. So they're 3-minute pieces. That was the idea, is that, you know, a round for an amateur boxer, each round is 3 minutes. They're not allowed to do more than 3 rounds for a bout. Is that right? I get my bouts and my rounds mixed up, my roundabouts. But then I broke the rules and did 4.
This was probably one of my favourite bits out of your 4, so I was hoping before we play it, if you could just introduce it and briefly describe it.
Well, we had a lovely moment of discovery actually together, didn't you? Because you came along quite a lot,
yeah.
And we're just around and kind of, you know, we were just chatting with the people in the boxing club, because their families and everything are there, all focused on the boxing as well, along with Simon taking photos. And when I'd said it was a car wash before, and the building is built around a core of steel girders, RSJs, in a kind of cube, and everything hangs off these girders. And so if you put contact mic in any place along those, you're getting different resonances from all the activity. And we spent quite a lot of time mouths open going, wow, listen to that, that's incredible sound. So I made one piece that was all kind of this kind of, it's called it undercut, which is a boxing term, but also just for, it was the underneath quiet sounds.
one of 4 pieces from our second sound artist, Jane Pitt. It's all part of Art Transmission. Now, our third sound artist was Kate, and Kate worked with the Sheppey Horticultural Society on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent. Unfortunately, Kate can't be with us today, but I did catch up with her earlier on and did a little interview with her. Right, we're now joined with Kate, and Kate is our third artist for our project Arts Transmission. Kate, it's always good to be able to speak to you. Welcome back to talking to us.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Daniel.
Well, I was wondering, firstly, Kate, if you could just give our listeners a little bit of an introduction into yourself and the project to start us off.
Yes, of course, yes. My interest in radio sort of goes back about 10 years, really, when I had been working in theatre for a long time, and I started working for BBC radio drama as a producer. And first of all, I was really working with playwrights, writers, developing scripts for drama, and then I began directing drama and sort of producing radio myself, which was quite a new departure in my career, which had all been sort of theatre-based, so very creative, but not really working in sound specifically. And it was just quite a big turning point for me, really, I think. And I just found that sound was something that I became quite fascinated by. I felt as though it was a form in which I could be quite instinctive, and I think it sort of tapped into some of my kind of past interest in music when I was growing up. And in a way, you know, that there's, even when you're directing drama and you're working with people speaking voices, there's a kind of musical element to it. And so I found that I was sort of drawing on other parts of my own creativity, really, by working in sound. So then, you know, I kind of took it from there. Drama was my the first kind of work that I made in sound, and I still do that. But I became so interested in it that whilst I was working as a radio producer, I started to do other things. So I started to make audio walks in which I was combining fictional voices and real voices. So they were a bit like drama documentaries that you would take for a walk with you. And I was very interested in people's responses to landscape and territory. So we made audio walks in a park in Birmingham, was the first project. We spent a long time talking to people about their relationship to that park, Cannon Hill Park in Birmingham. So I suppose all of those elements, many of those elements came together really in this particular piece of work that I've been doing on Sheppey.
So you've been working with the Sheppey Horticultural Society, our third local group. What's it been like working with them over the last few months?
Well, it's been very educational for me, definitely, because I've just got an allotment myself. I got it started working on it in January, which was actually kind of brilliant coincidence of this project. So on one level, I've gained lots and lots of sort of tips and all kinds of knowledge that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But on an artistic level, or just on a sort of personal level, I think it's just been so enjoyable. And I'm actually now quite sad that I won't, because obviously I live quite a long way away up in Nottingham, so I won't be seeing those people again, and or visiting the allotments, I don't think, for a while. So I'm very sad not to be doing that, because actually I've found it just so fascinating to talk to people in that environment, and the generosity of people in talking to me, the things that they've talked to me about, the camaraderie, I think, on the allotments. There have been lots of things that have surprised me, you know, in a good way, about being down there. So it's been a really rich experience for me, I'd say.
And that was that little interview I did with Kate. You are listening to Art Transmission live on Resonance FM. And what we're now going to do is listen to one of 3 pieces of sound art from Kate.
It's quiet over here, except when the children are in school, but the rest of the time it's just quiet, and I don't know, it's just nice, an escape.
I like the quietness of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
The fact that it is quiet, you can't really hear the cars or...
Just such a peaceful place to be, especially in the summer.
Well, we hear a lot of birds, especially in the spring. little birds like blackbirds and robins, and we have pigeons. We sometimes hear the ducks flying over and the geese flying over.
The only one I do know is I can pick out the woodpecker when he's about, because he's got a distinctive cry.
The thing that really stands out more than anything, the sounds, are the birds. The birds are singing all the time, always birds singing, and you're working away, and the bird, especially if you're digging, I've been digging, and I've put my fork down, and the birds are sitting on the fork. You pick the fork up and they just hop off and they sit by the fork waiting for you. They won't fly away. They'll wait for you to dig a worm up for them.
They've eaten that worm then that quickly?
Yeah, I've given them about half a dozen a little while ago. Come on in, girls.
On a windy day like this, you can hear the wind in the trees, especially with the big trees over there, if you'll go and see them tomorrow. Oh, we heard a dog, didn't we? And if there are cows in the field on the other side of the canal, we hear the cows. And sometimes we have an aeroplane that flies over. If it's going to be stormy, we hear the gulls.
Sometimes you do just sit here and have 5 minutes, peace and quiet. And like now, just listen to the sheds creaking and stuff like that, and bottles rattling on to keep the birds off, and it's just nice to have a bit of peace and quiet and a wake metal.
I sit here and there's no, apart from the birds, there's hardly any sound, and all of a sudden you start to pick up things, like the rattling of the bottles, plastic bottles on things.
And sometimes we hear sounds from the road like the police cars with their sirens and ambulances. But we also hear, if it's foggy, we also hear the boats because they hoot. And that can be quite eerie.
But the sound I really want to get, and I don't think we'll get it because it's the wrong time of year, is the frogs. And you were the first person that mentioned that to me.
Yes.
I want to hear the frogs.
I've got a couple of frogs in my greenhouse, but they haven't made any noise at all. No, that would be good. I've heard them in the ditch, but I haven't really heard them in the canal. It's deeper all the time, and frogs like shallower places.
Yeah, I can hear them from my bedroom window when I'm in Unity Street, yeah.
Really?
In the summer months, yeah.
And that's generally in the evenings, you hear?
Evenings or early morning. If it's going to get that hot weather, then that's the time.
It was like a symphony. They're further up. That's the frogs. That might spread. Because once they start calling, they all get in on the act.
Yeah. So which noise is it again?
The other things, of course, you do hear on the allotment is the mowers going, and the other thing that people use on the allotment for breaking up the soil.
You get noise from the neighbours where they're hoeing and things like that. You can hear him dragging his hoe across the floor. Now we're all pretty well uptight, and it's just a matter of watering, bit of feeding, nurturing.
Yeah.
Then about 11 o'clock I come home and talk to them and sing with them, like, you know, and that brings them up. It does work, yeah, doesn't it? You're the same, aren't you?
Oh yes, I talk to them.
What kind of things do you say to them?
Now, come on, my little beauties.
No, I don't consciously talk to them as a rule. Yeah, I ain't saying, you know, they've done studies that show that, you know, sound and music and voices and that are supposed to encourage them, but, you know, I'm lucky enough with the neighbours I got here, they probably just listen to us waffling on about nothing else, so I don't think you have to over here.
Right.
Yeah, no, I don't. If I started talking to me plants, I think my neighbour Alf here would have something to say to me.
We sit down usually with Mary, and she makes us coffee or tea, and we sit down and chat. So you hear a lot of chat between people on the allotment.
Can we record your sausages sizzling?
Yeah. Put other coffee on. Ah, record my sausages. Turn the fire on. Alfredo, you want a coffee?
Put it on the shed.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing. See, he cooks. He'll come down, and he'll come down in the morning. He'll do himself a breakfast. He'll call in, or one of the other lads will call in and get some bacon and eggs, anything he can find, and they'll have a cook up, and that'll be their breakfast, and bread and everything.
So we got sausage going on. I don't know the brand because it's on a fire now. It's a good one. That's a good one. 3 happy eggs. We got happy eggs today. What is it? It's a happy eggs somewhere.
He's such a, what should we say, a character that he draws people to him as well.
Yeah.
So you tend to go over there and you have your cup of coffee with him, and you have a good bit of banter amongst everybody else. Yeah, and if he's got a spare sausage, he'll give it to you. It might even be cooked if you're really lucky.
Right.
Right, let's see what's going on. The cooking. Look at that. Gorgeous. They're gorgeous. Sexy eggs. How's your sausage? It's nearly ready.
Here, Alfie, our birthdays are next week.
Come on, Alfie, have a sausage. Come here.
Sausage?
Sausage. A salsiccia.
He's nearly killed the botulism.
And that was one of 3 pieces from our third sound artist, Kate. And as with Jim and Jane and with Kate, if you search the artist's name and then Art Transmission into YouTube, you can find all the various parts of those pieces of sound art. We're now going to talk to Laura and Louise once again, and we're going to cover a little bit about our photographer Simon, who worked on the project, and also we're going to be having an exhibition, a sound and photography exhibition in Rochester in Kent, and hopefully Laura and Louise can tell us a bit about that as well.
We can. We'll just mention briefly Simon Martin, who was our photographer on the project, and he was really part of the team, accompanying all the artists to their various groups, meetings. So SKLR, I think he went down every Wednesday to the work days. Was that right, Jim?
Absolutely. He was clockwork. Fantastic.
He absolutely loved it, and he does ordinarily work in film, but obviously did some digital work for us as well for this project. He's a graduate photographer, and he's based in Sittingbourne, which was really handy, so he could come at a minute's notice. He also went with Jane to the Golden Gloves Boxing Club, which he loved, and shot in black and white, actually.
Yeah, he shot lots in, and particularly popular with the older guys boxing, who really enjoyed seeing their images, I think.
And he was also taken with the Horticultural Society as well. Went with Kate when she came down on the weekends to take lots of beautiful pictures down there, and he's taken some nice portraits of allotment holders, actually, which will be shown in an exhibition. So he was really integral to our project, and yeah, it's a shame he can't be here today, but he was a good member of the team.
Well, you know, Louise, he did me sorry, very loud there. he did me a very special favour.
Did he?
Which was when I was trying to get the SKLR people used to me, I decided it'd be nice to do a sort of homage to like 70s kind of body art, and I did a piece called Legs Sticking Out of Carriages. And we wandered all around the site. They've got such a large amount of rolling stock there, loads of these train carriages. And I clambered onto metal. I mean, my back's never been the same since, I'm afraid. No more wheelbarrowing for me. But I'd sticking my legs out, and Simon bravely photographed a whole series.
No, we haven't seen those.
Well, I think
we need to ask him about those.
We need to sort of
Have they been any of your
dig
films,
into his archive. Coming right up, I'd say, yeah.
I think the thing about him was that we'd seen his portfolio from when he did his degree at Middlesex, and he'd taken a particular interest in mini golf and people that have mini golf in their back garden, and he'd travelled all around the country, I think, actually, to actually photograph people with a mini golf set out in their back garden.
So it was that enthusiastic thing, wasn't it? It was enthusiast, and I think he was the right photographer for our project,
yeah,
because of all the enthusiasts at SKLR, at the Boxing Club, at the Horticultural Society, he managed to really capture that.
Well, I think, the good thing about Simon, well, one of the many good things is that he's got a real familiarity with doing community-based work. So, as you say, working with the miniature golf people, I mean, a similar set of very dedicated, brilliant fanaticists. And also he was working with a sort of volunteer cadets, military cadets. So he was going off camping in the wilds with military cadets for the weekend, and I mean, that takes some dedication.
Well, that was one of the nice things about Simon and all the artists. When I sort of started working with Laura and Louise and putting this project together, you have hopes of how you'd hope it would be, but until you work with the artist and the photographer, you don't know how it's going to work. And I was able to spend the time with Jim, Jane and Kate and with Simon, and it was a real together project, and I think that's what helped make it, hopefully.
I think it's the first thing you learn on working on these community projects, is that you really have to throw yourself into it and get involved. It's the only way it works, and then you kind of win the trust and the friendship of everyone involved, and that's really when the work starts to happen.
Well, you'll get a chance to see some of Simon's work and also to hear all the sound artists' work. We're having an exhibition in Chatham, not Rochester, Chatham High Street, a gallery called the Pop Gallery, and that will be from the 25th of September to the 4th of October. And it gives you a chance to come and listen to all the sound pieces and to see some of Simon's work. And it kind of is like the finale, really, of Art Transmission, which has been a fantastic project. I want to thank you all for being part of that, because we've had a fantastic time and made some amazing work, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Well, I'd like to thank all of you very much for working with me. Of course, thank you to Laura and Louise, FrancisKnight, BRFM, the community station I work with, Creative People and Places, Swale and Medway. It's certainly been a really good project, and also thank you to residents for letting us do this show today.
Yeah, I do believe residents will be playing out all the pieces by the artists, so I'm told by Jim.
Well, so I hear. So keep your ears tuned to this station, and at some point work from Jane Pitt and Kate Chapman and myself, Jim Whelton, will be appearing as previously aired on BRFM. Just one thing I would like to mention, if there's a second, is if you want to treat your ears, do get down to Sittingbourne and ride on the SKLR. And there's a visual treat, there's olfactory treats, but more than anything, if you shut your eyes and ride on that old steam railway, you'll have a most fantastic adventure. And if you can, wander out up the creek.
And we had a little blog for this project as well, and if you'd like to read all the blog posts from the artists, or of course get all those pieces of Sound Arts podcasts, all you need to do is go to www.arttransmissionradioexperiment.wordpress.com.